Greetings everyone, it is Zakhele here and welcome to our weekly videos. Today we are talking about something that, it's pretty important to me as a libertarian, and I'm sure to you if you're a regular watcher of the channel, right? Because by the time you'll be watching this, it will be Tax Freedom Day. So happy Tax Freedom Day to you, South African. And if you are an international watcher, I hope you try and figure out when your Tax Freedom Day in your jurisdiction is. But for those who are wondering that, right, because it's a pretty obscure concept unless you are in the liberty movement, what Tax Freedom Day is, here's a brief description, right? Tax Freedom Day is the day when you stop paying tax to the state. Wouldn't that just be a great thing? Like, can we just stand there and the day we stop paying taxes? But it's a hypothetical, it's an exercise that that we do here at the Free Market Foundation. We did not pioneer the idea, of course, but it is an exercise whereby we take the average income of the South African and we take their average taxation contribution, right, tied to that particular income, right? And then we do a hypothetical of how many months it would take the average South Africans to work before they have paid off their entire taxation obligation. And that is pretty much what Tax Freedom Day is. It is an exercise that is meant to show you how much you have to work, how long you would have to work in a given year for you to pay off your taxation obligation. And as such, by me saying that today is Happy Tax Freedom Day, it means that the average South African, if they were not using their income for anything else other than paying tax, they would have to work from January up until May for them to be able to pay off their entire taxation burden. I want us to think about that. They would have to work just the entire time, right? So hypothetically, of course, if they did not use their income on anything else, they would have finished paying off their taxation burden today in May. And I find that to be, one of the clearest and starkest examples of the injustice of not only progressive taxation, but taxation as a general concept. But I'm an anarchist in that regard, so I do know that there are people who disagree with that. But that is what Tax Freedom Day is, and for South Africa this year, well, our Tax Freedom Day is today. So as I said, happy Tax Freedom Day. But now since I've explained it, I'm sure you're like, is it really a happy day? Or so, so yeah, I'm still kind of, struggling with whether it is happy or just a day, that should be commemorated. But definitely it is something that we should be thinking about. You should be thinking about your tax burden and seeing how absurd it is that you have to pretty much expend your productive activity for this much without getting anything in return, right? Like, so much of your yearly salary, nearly half of it, goes towards the state, and that is truly something that is unfathomable, or it ought to be unfathomable, and it should not be tolerated. And the best way for us to show that we don't tolerate it is hopefully voting out those who are proponents of such taxation regimes, right? But here at the Free Market Foundation, we have been, releasing the statistics and pretty much having a project about Tax Freedom Day ever since 1994, right? And just to show you as an example of the growing state that we have in South Africa is that in the 90s, right? I think did we start in 1994, 1996, but in the 90s, right, after the institution of a democratic dispensation here in South Africa, when the FMF started releasing, having a project about Tax Freedom Day, the South African Tax Freedom Day was in April. Right, I think it was around the 14th of April, but mid-April. And now we have progressed, right? In 2025, it is now mid-May. It keeps on getting extended by a day. You keep on having to work one more day, and before you know it, it's been a month, right? You keep on having to work more and giving more of what you work for to the state, really. Let us put it in that, right? Because you would work in any other way, but more and more of what you work for keeps on going towards the state, meaning that in the logic of Tax Freedom Day, you have to pretty much work more and more days for you to be able to fully pay off your taxation burden. And this is something that we should always keep in mind, that tax, government expenditure, and the amount of money you have in your pocket are not disconnected. They are connected if you're a working person, right? Government expenditure is reliant on your productive activity. And as we have seen, it has been growing with every passing year in South Africa. Now, you should always think about this when politicians are saying that they are doing something for your your own good as a working person is that they can't do anything without your taxation, without the results of your productive activity. Then you should ask yourself, what is it really can they do besides, moving a bunch of money around, which is something politicians are great at doing, by the way. So there is that. But that is Tax Freedom Day here in South Africa. I hope that you actually do seriously think about the implications of taxation on your general, financial health. And most importantly, you start looking at the South African political landscape with an understanding that what parties propose usually in government expenditure has a direct correlation to the amount of money you will have in your pockets, right? And as we have mentioned, what is the best way? Ideally, we want to have Tax Freedom Day maybe in February. Let us just walk it back and take it back to having it in April, March, February. The ideal scenario would be to have Tax Freedom Day in January, at the end of January. But I don't know how the state would look in that regard, right? Or our taxation base would have to be pretty good, pretty big, and that is something for us to aspire towards. But we would like for Tax Freedom Day to be much, much more earlier, given the implications that it has when it is much more later. And the best way to do this well, as I will probably sound like a broken record, is that we have devised the solutions here at the Free Market Foundation. We have our Liberty First series, which pretty much gives the South African state a blueprint on how they can achieve prosperity, and most importantly, for the purposes of our video today, on how they can make Tax Freedom Day come much more earlier in the year. And that directly ties to the size of government, as I have mentioned. The more the state grows in scope and size, the more it will need resources to sustain and maintain this growth in scope and size. And the solution to lessening the tax burden, right, which the resources are tied to, would be to just reduce the size and scope of the state. As I have spoken when I've spoken about the size of government, is that we have to seriously reconsider what we consider the state's job, what it ought to do, because all that it does is contingent on our funds as working people. And as such, we should be acutely aware that whenever a politician promises to do something for you, you are in most cases not doing it for yourself as citizens. And as such, hopefully with that realization, we will no longer fall for taxation regimes that have us having Tax Freedom Day close to the middle of the year, right? As I'm sure as time progresses, we will get, hopefully never, but we could get to a point whereby Tax Freedom Day is in June or something, and that would be pretty unfathomable to have half of your working year and the results thereof just being dedicated towards the state. And the solution to that is to just reduce the size of the government, the size and scope of the state. And we are currently dealing with that, right, with the budget crisis that we have in South Africa and the government's inability to sustain itself, right? It even proposed raising taxes, and South Africans rightfully rejected that very idea because we are already overtaxed as a working population in South Africa, and as such, the thought that Treasury even contemplated taxing us even more should have been rejected. But to avoid situations like that, whereby the state cannot meet its expenditure goals, is to just reduce expenditure, just like you and me do when our expenses override our income. We have to cut back on certain things, and that is what the state has to do. And overall, concerning the philosophy of the state itself, its scope, what is involved in doing, and the size, the amount of people that are doing those things within the state has to be reduced. That way we can have lower taxes. And as we have seen with the VAT issue, right, I know for a fact that most South Africans love lower taxes. So it isn't no longer just, a fringe libertarian thing, like, oh no, taxes are horrible. Now I'm sure that most of us can agree, right? Even if you see this video and you aren't libertarian leaning, you're like, oh man, this free market guy and his ideas. But I'm sure you can agree that lower taxes are good for everyone. So yeah, happy Tax Freedom Day. As I have said, I hope you seriously think about the implications of tax, and most importantly, I hope you seriously think about the implications of the size and the scope of the state, right? As we have mentioned, because, well, they directly impact how much money you have, given that they are tied, the scope and size of the state is tied to, a taxation base and how much tax the state can extract from its citizens. So that has been all from Zakes this week. Please do tell me what you think below in the comments. Please do go on the Liberty First website to check out our paper on the size and scope of government, where we do mention that, cut government spending and reduce taxes. And please do check out the Free Market Foundation website. There will be all the information you will need about Tax Freedom Day. If you want to, get informed more, share our work as we always implore you to do. It really does help us a lot. Give this video a like, please. That also helps. Engage in the comments. I'm a huge fan of that. I try to read some, when I do get the time. So yeah, please engage in the comments. Please give this video a like, share it, and remember, stay free.